Coaches across the country used the Coachpad this past season to be more efficient with their scout card prep on the weekends as well as when out on the practice field working with their scout teams. Whether you're a coach using a computer program to create cards or drawing them by hand, the Coachpad is for you. Never printing paper or stuffing a binder, clearly seeing scout cards outdoors in the bright sun, and using the coach pad on game days, syncing diagrams from the press box to the sideline were some of the features coaches enjoyed this season. This offseason, get your coach pad at thecoachpad.com to get your program ready for next season. Thecoachpad.com. Welcome back to another episode of the Gap Downbacker podcast. Today we have the offensive coordinator at Lackawanna College out there in Pennsylvania, Coach Ray Dayton. Coach, how are you doing?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
Doing good. I appreciate you coming on. For coaches who might not have heard of Lackawanna or have seen you, kind of how did you end up as the offensive coordinator at Lackawanna?
So I was a high school coach for probably like 10 years up in the southern tier of New York, and just wanted to make the jump. I played junior college football at Alfred State early 2000s. Lackawanna was always a power. I talked to a friend of mine. His name is Lou Sella, and he said they were looking for a running backs coach at Lackawanna. I applied. It turns out they were looking for a linebackers coach. So I'd coached on the defensive side of the ball for a year. I came down here, applied, and interviewed, and they offered me a job that day. Been here kind of ever since. During the pandemic, I went up and I coached at Milford Academy. It's a prep school in upstate New York. After that, I did like a year out at Erie Community College out in Buffalo. And then Coach Pardini called me, said he was going to transition to a role as the assistant athletic director, and I ended up being the OC from there. So just kind of.
I'll ask you, how do you think that year and change of coaching defense has kind of helped you as an offensive coordinator, especially as kind of the post-COVID transition stuff?
Yeah, I think it helped me because it just made me look at the other side of the ball a little bit more. I mean, as a head coach, you're gonna, offense, defense, special teams, but I mean, it was really cool for me because it allowed me to kind of work on, reverse engineer some stuff like, hey, this is how we're gonna fit some runs, and this is how we're gonna do some stuff from the defensive side. I'm like when I was always a defensive line coach when I was in high school. So coaching linebackers was a little bit of a change, but I really liked it because it allowed me to kind of have my hands in both the front half and the back half. Coach Reese is our defensive coordinator here. I think he's been here for like 14 years. He does a great job. And like I said, I think working with him, just kind of seeing and Coach Duda, our head coach, who's our defensive line coach, kind of working both sides of that with those guys. I think it helped me as a coordinator because, you just kind of had to have some answer stuff because they were going to definitely, scheme up some stuff for you. You know what I mean? I guess, does that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, Coach. I mean, the other thing, we talked about this before we came on, like, how has, and you can get as much detail as you want, like, JUCO recruiting evolved over the past couple years? Because obviously the floodgates of NCAA, NIL, and transfer portals, and just the rise of NAIAs. How has that all affected kind of what you do, your interesting situation of JUCO and then transfers to bigger schools?
Yeah, so I think it's obviously it's helped us and it's hurt us. I think it's helped us in that it allows us to like everybody. There's no longer like a stigma as far as kids that have transferred, right? Everybody's a transfer kid. We have a joke around here, like our head coach has been here for 30 years, and his joke is that he's like, I've been to transfer portal for 30 years, man. Everybody's been taking my players. So it's been interesting because like it's got us in the door with some kids that are maybe like some qualifier kids that we would have no chance at, but because they kind of run out of spots, and kids don't want to go to Division II. I know there's the big thing, oh, I'll go to Division II and then I'll portal out. I mean, that really hasn't been the case. At least we haven't seen that. And like, those guys at those Division IIs, they're going to try and keep those kids there. Us, we're not going to do that. Like we have to get kids out. Like if we don't get kids out, we'll never get another kid in. So I think it's helped us in that aspect. I think where it's, probably where it's hurt us is it hurts us on the other end with our kids leaving. Like, I don't think that, like in the past, like if you wanted to get an older guy, like you went to JUCO, you know what I mean? But if you want to get an older guy, you just find a guy in a transfer portal that fits kind of your scheme. So I think that's where it's hurt us and it's helped us. So probably helps us on the front end and then hurts us on the back end. So, but I don't think it's as bad as, I mean, obviously it's probably crazy, like at the higher levels, I'm sure it's crazy, but for us anyway, I think, like I said, it's got us the ability to get some better players. And it's just, as far as placing our kids, I think that's probably where it's been a little bit more challenging than it probably has been in the past. So,
Well, with that, has that affected your offense at all with your ability to get a little bit better players? I mean, has that allowed you to do more things, do different things?
I don't. So like, we always use the analogy, like Coach Pardini is a chef by trade, right? So he was and he was the OC here before me, and he always used the analogy of the crock pot and the microwave, right? So the crock pot, your mom comes, she puts the stuff in the oven, it's there or the pot there, and it's 4 or 5 hours later, all those spices, it comes out tasting really good. That's like 4 years school to us, right? Those guys have all that time to get everything done and to teach all that stuff to those kids. That's not me at all. Like, we're more like the microwave. We're like a guy heating up pizza rolls, then maybe crisping them up in the oven or something like that, trying to get everything tasting good as fast as we possibly can. You know what I mean? So like everything that we do in our program from a coaching standpoint, I think is to make things to accelerate learning for our kids. Like, we're a wristband team. We kind of use that Tony Franklin model of wristband where like our kids are gonna, they're gonna look down at their wristband and they're gonna get their, we're gonna teach them the concept first, but like we're just gonna remind them kind of what the route is. You know what I'm saying? Or what their assignment is to the best of our ability. Now you can't have a goddamn novel on the wrist. That's not real. You know what I mean? You're not gonna have. You wouldn't go do 22 burpees and then try and unlock your door or something like that. Like I don't want to do that and make it tough for those kids in that aspect. So, but everything we do is just to kind of try and accelerate that learning process, because if we're doing our job, like we're going to get kids out, in 18 months or in as little as a semester. Because if you're a qualifier in the NJCAA, you have one calendar year to leave. If you're a non-qualifier, obviously you have to get your associate's degree. So, and then if you're a bounce back kid, they have this rule I'm surprised somebody hasn't challenged it yet. It's called the 4-2-4 rule. Whereas if you're a 4-year kid going to a 2-year school, you have to get your associate's degree to go back to a 4-year institution. So, we do everything we can to just kind of move fast and get those kids in and out of here as fast as possible. And the way that we can do that is get them to play really good, really, really fast. So,
yeah. Now, I mean, with that, we'll hit on it because me and you've talked about A gap power just in general. Like with your not wide, your narrowed playbook and you're kind of focused on what you want to do and why you do it. Why do you guys run A gap power? Why is that something you're just like, okay, that's something we can teach fairly efficiently, simply, and quickly?
Well, I think part of it is because because of who I am, and it's just an easy play for us to fix. Now, it takes a lot of reps and stuff like that, but like really what we do up front is, we want to be as physical as possible. And I think, if anybody that's ever met our head coach will say that, like, if I asked him today, like, what do you want our offense to be? He would say physical, right? Because we're still in the belief that the most physical team wins the football game, right? We might not be able to be as fast as the teams in Mississippi, and we might not be able to be as fast as the teams out in in Kansas and stuff like that. Because, like, to be honest with you, we're kind of recruiting kids from that, from New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Northeast Ohio, Maryland, and Virginia. Probably as far down as we get is really like North Carolina, and like the speed is down there. A lot of speed is down there in South Carolina, Georgia and Florida. We don't know if we can always match up with those guys. Now, we got really, really fast guys, don't get me wrong. But I know on a weekly basis, like, we can line up and be a physical football team that's really gritty and grimy from the Northeast. And that's kind of how we're going to be, just because of who I am and because of, who our head coach is. So that's kind of why we've always ran the play. And then from a schematic standpoint, I always think that, like, we're going to believe in the power run game, because, like, those blocks, I think, are easier. You know what I mean? Angles create force. So even though, like, I got guys that play on our offensive line, like, I think we're like 6'7", probably 300. Like, we got big kids across the board, but, like, if I can use those big kids to create force, through the gap schemes and through the angles that we get, then it's going to allow us to move the defense, right? I listened to Connor Riley from Kansas State talk a long time ago, and he said, everybody asks me, how do you stop the run? Well, you stop the run by holding point, right? You don't get moved off the spot. Well, how do you run the ball? Well, you move people off the point. So, like, we've always kind of built our run game around that and the idea of double teams. The other reason why I like A-gap power is because I know what I'm going to get out of the running back. Like, the ball is going in the A-gap, right? It's A to A. Okay, so, like, when we teach the play, we don't teach it as I know, like, I was at the AFCA convention. I talked to Coach Drinkle, and I like a lot of the things that he did at Kansas Wesleyan and stuff like that. And he talks about a rhythm power play where they're gonna the guard's gonna read the kick out block, and maybe he'll pull around it, stuff like that. I don't feel like I have time to teach that to our guys. I think it's easier for me to kind of put everything in the coordinator's hands. And like I said, I want to accelerate our learning. So I don't want our guys to have to think a whole bunch when they're out there. I want them to kind of line up and just play fast. You know what I mean? I want our rules to be super simple. I don't want our puller to think about anything. I want him to take 2 shuffle steps over there, evaluate that double team and that kick out block. If the kick out's losing, right, then he should just go there, wreck shop. We're not going to get TFL'd. The ball's going to go in the A gap, and now it's going to be 2nd and 7 or 2nd and 8. And then we can kind of stay on schedule that way. So, like, if you're at our place, if you were to talk to anybody on offense, they would tell you that there's one thing that can't happen, and that is you can't get spilled, right? We have the mentality that if you're allowing the defense to spill you, they're taking your scholarship, right? And that's a choice. So we're not gonna give them that choice. Now, I know as the offensive coordinator that, like, if that defensive player is just going to come down there hell bent for election and do everything he can to take out the inside of that kick out block, well, then they're going to be able to do that. But for us, what that does is it sets up kind of the rest of our offense, right? So, when I was a high school coach, everybody kind of ran like they were series-based offenses. I saw wing T, split back veer, double wing, like all that stuff. And there was always an answer play, right, in the series. So for us, and there was a base play, then an answer play. So our base play is going to be power. Well, how do you stop power? Okay, well, I'm going to spill power. Well, now I'm going to put my tailback, who's probably going to be our best player, out in space, one-on-one, without having to reach block at the point of attack. And I'm going to do that either through, like, zone read or, some of the bash read stuff, or, we run a fake power play, and stuff along those lines. We'll run a little bit of our power bounce, where we'll log it, and then we'll tell the guard to sickle pull around, kind of giving us, like, almost that buck sweep or pin and pull type of look. But, like, our whole thing is kind of set up off of that. We want to be we always want to hold the pen last. So like we're gonna line up, we're gonna run our base play, and then we're gonna just answer the defense off of that. Like if you look at my call sheet, like the way we set it up, we have base play, then we have, the answer to how the defense is going to stop it, which is usually spill. Like if it's power, it'll be spill, right? And then we have two answers off of that. And then we're going to have an RPO and then a play action pass. And that's just kind of how we build our call sheet based off of all that stuff. Does that make sense?
Yep. That's great. That's a great explanation. You're making my job easy today. Now, I mean, as you've run A gap power, what have you, you kind of mentioned some of it there, like you figured out some of the, okay, if they're taking it away, like, cause they're just diving hard, we're going to log it, we're gonna do this. How has the process been of, okay, here's the formations that we like for it. Here's the answers that we like. Here's the answers we don't like. What does that kind of process look like over the past couple of years to figure out, okay, we like A gap power. Here's our answers. Here's the formations. Here's what we like. Here's what we don't like. What does that process kind of look like, and kind of the trial area period been?
Right. So for us anyway, what we're really looking for, as far as like what we're really, really looking for, is how are they going to play the B gap, right? If they put okay, bear front's one thing, and that's a great thing about playing against the guys that we have on our defensive staff. Like we're going to see, and I don't know how other coordinators are, offensive coordinators or whatever, or offensive line coaches, but like day one, I'm going to see odd, even, and bear. I know that I'm going to get, every stunt, every twist, every loop, every blitz that you can think of, basically day one. So like when I line up and play Monroe College, and Johan Williams, the defense coordinator there, who does a great job, our guys don't freak out about anything. So we're already prepared for it. And then from like a formation standpoint, we're going to look at like, how do they defend the B gap? Okay. Are they going to put a defensive lineman in the B gap? And from there, we kind of call our plays based off of that. If you're again, talking to Coach Drinkle at the AFCA convention, really great guy. And he said, if the defensive lineman's in the C gap, well, we'll just keep running that A gap power play. Well, okay. So once they line a defensive tackle up in the B gap, like 4-eye or bear, and anybody that says that you can't run gap schemes against bear, like a guy named Marty Fine was the head coach at Bryant. He taught me, and Tony Wise, these guys have convinced me that this is how you block the bear front, and we can go into that if you want. But anytime that they put that defensive tackle there in the B gap, we're going to add a third man into the surface, and we are going to run the C gap power play. So, like we kind of learned that stuff from Coach Perlis, who was at Syracuse. And that was something that he really believed in, like running the C gap play and the A gap play. And again, I just think the two plays complement each other, kind of like you would run inside zone and outside zone. It's kind of the same idea. So for us anyway, and then after that, like it's just window dressing. Like we're going to create a whole bunch of eye candy, like through formations, motions, and shifts. And the other thing, like, so we've always talked about like tempo. I mean, that's the other thing. Like you can either be heavy in, there's two ways to attack a defense pre-snap, right? You can either formation, motion, and shift, or you can line up and you can go really, really fast. Well, if you go really, really fast, then a lot of your answers have to be post-snap. If you're going to formation, motion, and shift, it's my feeling that kind of now it goes from Billy Reese being the defensive coordinator, who's our defensive coordinator here, to Andre Blackett, was our inside linebacker, being a defensive coordinator. So they've got to make all those calls, right? I want to make the 18, 19-year-old kid make all those checks and everything, as opposed to the defensive coordinator. You know what I mean? But we'll do both. And I love to go fast. Like that's one of our favorite things is tempo. And I think when an offense can do both, and we can attack a defense pre-snap through formations, motions, and shifts and tempo, then you've really, really got something, because then it's okay. Now we're going to motion shift. Okay, they've seen all this. And then, okay, now we're going to go super, super fast. You get what I'm saying? Does that make sense to you?
Yep.
So after we tax the kid physically where, oh my God, where am I going to get my next breath? Now I want to make them think. Or I want to make them think a whole bunch. And then, okay, well, where am I going to get my next breath? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. But that's how we do it, is we're looking to see how are they defending the B gap. All right, if there's a defensive tackle in that B gap, okay, is it a 4-eye? All right, it's a 4-eye. We're going to kind of run the C gap power play now. If he's out there in the C gap, we're going to stay there. We're going to make an out scheme with the tight end, and we're going to kind of still run there right in the A gap.
Now, I'll ask you, like, so with running A and C gap power, both of them, how are you handling the different techniques, or how much are you trying to keep the same? Because obviously, I mean, are you keeping the pulls the same? Obviously, A gap power is more horizontal, double team.
No, so like A gap. So for us, A gap power is going to be like we used to skip out with it, but like we would skip past the entry point was kind of why we stopped doing that. So like, Coach Fuchs and those guys, they'd talk to us, about shuffling over. And I know that was something that Coach Pardini and I had worked on, is we would get those guys and we would go shuffle, insert. And I just thought that was better coming off of that front side tag or deuce block, that gap scheme double team between the guard and the tackle, because we would never get past that. We could kind of evaluate that block when we were working over there. And then on the C gap play, we're just going to get the guard there as fast as we can. So it doesn't matter. I like to skip pull. I know that we've like some guys don't like to do that, and they're little open pull. My big thing is like when you get there, you gotta be square. Okay, I don't want you to be turning like a dump truck or tractor trailer or whatever. I want you to get to that C gap, and when you get to that C gap, I want you to be able to insert square. I think the skip covers more ground, but I don't think guys are, some guys are more, are taught that traditional pull in high school. It's not as prevalent. I think more guys skip now. But like whatever the kid is really comfortable with, it's not going to be a shuffle in the C gap play just because it's one hole wider. It's the same thing if we were going to pull the tackle on our like we'll do that on our dart schemes. Like we don't shuffle on our dart schemes. We're going to have that guy either skip out or open pull, whatever he's got to do to get there as fast as he can. Does that make sense? And then our double teams on the C gap, our double teams on our gap scheme plays are different than on the zone scheme plays. So our zone schemes, right, most of the time, like if we're not making a call to make it a full zone play, then like those double teams are going to be the old school, like Crowther vertical double team, take the guy back. And then on the gap scheme stuff, we're going to be a more lateral. Like those are going to be our lateral double teams. So gap schemes are kind of lateral, zone schemes are kind of vertical, and it forces the defense to play you kind of two different ways.
No, perfect. All right, one of the last questions I'll ask you is I mean, you mentioned bear front there. How are you handling the bear front? Because obviously, when especially at the high school level, but even at the small school level, obviously, like, oh, you're gonna run a bunch of gap scheme. We're just gonna get in bear. We're gonna line up and do.
So for us against the bear front, can you see that?
Yes.
Do you see that board? Okay, so we're gonna just make a call here on the back side of it. Now in high school, your rules are a little different than what we have right here, right? Yeah. So even if you're in like this 20 personnel look and you're getting bear, like we have this guy come down here and he cuts. Then we're going to man block the nose there. We're going to take this, and then we're going to go all the way back there to what we call the minus. We're going to kick here, and then we're going to wrap. And again, it's that A-gap entry point, right? Now, in high school, you can't cut like that, right?
You have to, at least in Ohio, you have to go immediately. Like there's no hesitation. If you're going to cut, it has to be snap of the ball.
So if we don't like that, if this kid doesn't like that cut,
Yeah.
then he just says text, 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 right? And then he'll stay and he'll become the puller.
Okay.
And it becomes that right there.
So it
But
becomes
we
almost
still
like
get
a dart pull essentially at that
Yep,
point.
it just becomes a dart pull, like you just check it like that. We just say text, text, text because
Okay.
T, you know what I mean? Kind of like that. But yeah, and that's just kind of how we solve that. And like now it's got to become if you're tagging RPOs with it, it's got to become kind of a C gap read there, like that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No, perfect.
So that's how we've kind of handled that in the past. We like that. I like the cut block because I think it slows down guys from rushing and stuff like that. But if they're gonna break your balls in high school about cutting that guy there, or your tackle doesn't feel good about it, then just pull him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's no big deal for us. We just say text, 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 and we pull the tackle.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah, I have a buddy that does something similar when he gets like 4 eyes and a couple other fronts. Like it's just an easier block for the guard is just the fan block out to that 4 eye, and then he pulls his tackle off.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing. Like you're getting 4 eyes. That's what everybody. Like we always, I used to we used to really freak out. Like, 4 eyes, that odd? Is it even? Say, hey, if he's a 4 eye, just go shoot a shoe. He's gonna do something, right? If he moves out here to a 5, well, that's easy. If he comes in here and plays a 3, well, then he's a 3 now, right? Then there is no 4 eye.
Yeah.
So you can just kind of dick with them with their splits there. If you watch like Coastal Carolina, like I think they do a better job with that than anybody with their kind of their zone schemes of like, influences those tackles, putting them out to 4 feet, stuff like that. And then they've got to really make a decision on what that tackle wants to do because the space gets to be so much. We can do the same thing here. You just cut it down and that 4 eye will usually become a 3 or he'll become a 4. So then it's easy there. It's an easy cutoff. You know what I mean?
Okay. And then the last thing I'll ask you for the podcast version portion wise anyways is, I mean, obviously with everything you do, like what details do you think are, especially for high school coaches looking to add A gap power or trying to put A and C gap power both in and not running one or the other, what details do you think missed or little things that like should be focused on when running power just in general?
I think that I think you've got to have the kick out block. I think is the most important thing there, right? Like, one of the things that you could really, if you watch 2013 Auburn, I mean, going way back about 10 years ago now, they probably had the best H-back in the history of college football. I can't remember the kid's name, but you watch those big guys that you got to have a real boy dog is what we always talk about. You got to have a boy dog kind of there at H-back. And if your kick out, if you can win the kick out, even if they spill, like if they'll spill you and you'll take that kick out and take it vertical, then you'll always have kind of a chance to not get TFL'd or the ball get bounced or anything like that. Like I think that like, fullbacks are kind of, they're kind of losing favor and everything like that. But if you watch the Ravens, who probably runs the ball better than everybody, everybody kind of gives their quarterback, and he's a great player and everything like that. But that dude that plays fullback for him is 315 pounds. You know what I mean? And like he's gonna kick out, like you're gonna spill that guy. I don't think that's a real thing, because he can get there, get spilled, take it vertical, and then you still gotta play. You know what I mean? I think that kick out block and taking the correct path to that kick out on an A gap play, I think is really, and the C gap play. I think that's really the most important thing, on the power play and and even, on any gap scheme play, really, even on counter. I think if you can win the kick out, then you can have a play. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Perfect, Coach. Well, coaches, if you want to hear more from about how they run offense and just general, just power and some of the other stuff they do, window dressing wise, like he kind of mentioned there, and some of his own stuff. Coach's Twitter will be in the bio. Reach out to Coach. You can probably also go on their website, and I bet his email's on there too. Like if I had to guess, I bet that's pretty standard for colleges as well. So check out Coach there. Like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Check out our sponsors, Coachpad. Otherwise, that's another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.